Hello, welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove, and in today's episode, joined by Newcastle United chief writer Lee Ryder. You'll hear from Sean later in the week, and both Sean and Lee will be back with their regular show next week. Lee, welcome back to the podcast. I suspect you're feeling a little bit happier after Newcastle United finally managed to win a Premier League game.
Yeah, I mean, it's been long overdue, but you look at the league table and the way it is, it's certainly a case of what might have been when you look at the way Newcastle just thrown points away. And we're now, I don't believe any Newcastle fan who hasn't had the calculator out and tried to plot a way into Europe with the remaining games. It's still possible, but Newcastle showed what they can do. I mean, whether the storm against Brighton, let's not look at it unrealistically, but they got the 3 points, they got the job done, and Brighton couldn't finish on the day. So, you get what you make your own luck sometimes. But yeah, it's a case of great win, but potentially a case of what might have been.
Yeah, I think we're all Aston Villa fans on Thursday, aren't we? Get them to the final, they lift the cup, and there's an extra space, hopefully, for Europe, although it is still a little bit out of reach for Newcastle United. We've had plenty of questions sent in, both over social media and over email, so thank you to everyone who's got in touch. We're going to run through the best of them now, and we'll dive straight in on Eddie Howe's future. Still the big talking point, still no official word on what is going to happen with Eddie Howe, but it's understood that he will lead the club into next season. And this one comes from Davey in Prido, who asks, there's been a lot said over the weekend that Eddie Howe is safe and will lead Newcastle into the new season. Is this the case? And if so, does this mean the 7-game finish that was mentioned by David Hopkinson wasn't actually a thing?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what David Hopkinson said at the time, we need a strong finish and we need to try and get into Europe. Well, as it stands, they haven't had a strong finish from those 7 games so far. That can still be improved, and they might not get into Europe. But by everyone I've asked, and I've gone to some high places to try and get clarification. Eddie Howe will be the manager next season. That's what we're being told. That's what their plan is, to have Eddie Howe starting pre-season. Now, football is football. We don't know what could change over the summer. Eddie Howe is a manager who's been linked with other clubs before. We don't know if something like that, could happen. A job could become available, and that could be something that might tempt him. I don't know. He's previously nailed his colours to the mast, but in terms of the outcome of that meeting, it's all been completely played down, and it almost feels like he was never under any serious threat going into that meeting, and certainly after it, getting the win. Owner looked happy at the weekend, and Newcastle got the points. But let's be realistic. If we're thinking that that's fixed everything, one win, then that wouldn't be the case, would it? So, look, they need to continue trying to get points on the board. If they can scrape into Europe, that would be something. But whatever way you look at it, it's been a bad season in the Premier League.
Often people who are very much in the Eddie Howe camp say that if he was to leave Newcastle, he'd be in line for a top job or almost instantly. But we never really see any of those so-called big six come after Eddie Howe. And look, if you're Chelsea, for example, some would argue now is probably the right time, given the scrutiny and speculation over Eddie Howe's future at Newcastle United. But again, no real strong links, no real strong speculation that Chelsea would turn to Howe at the end of this season. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that we don't ever see these so-called big clubs come sniffing around Eddie Howe? Is it because straight away he shuts it down, and maybe there's been private conversations and it's made very clear that he's at Newcastle United for as long as Newcastle United owners and fans want him?
I mean, to be totally honest, if Eddie Howe leaves Newcastle United, where he goes next it's none of our business, really, as Newcastle fans and followers and reporters. Doesn't really make that much difference. It would be about who gets the job after Eddie Howe at Newcastle. So that, for me, is it's not a massive sort of subject that would keep me up at night. If he went to Chelsea, wherever he went would no longer be anything to do with us. But that doesn't seem to be the case. In terms of why that hasn't happened previously, I guess it's circumstances. I guess there's a long list of candidates. If you look at the list of candidates in the bookmakers on who's going to be the next Chelsea boss, Eddie Howe is not on that list. So that doesn't even feel like it's a starter, really. Wales could he go? Liverpool seem settled with their manager. Arsenal are very happy with their manager. Man City very happy with their manager. So I don't know where he goes. I don't know what the better job is after Newcastle for him. There's been talk about England in the past. England have committed to keeping Thomas Tuchel on after the World Cup, so that's not going to happen. So yeah, it's a strange question.
Dan from Hayden Bridge has emailed in and writes, Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, in his opinion, couldn't defend Leeds, wouldn't change the system, and stayed loyal to underperforming players and put them in the wrong positions. He kept repeating the same mistakes until they got relegated. Give Eddie Howe the next transfer window, take it to Christmas, and if we are still making the same mistakes by then, we already know where this ends. So I guess the question is, like, do you agree with anything that Dan has said there? And secondly, given that Eddie Howe looks like he's going to remain in charge, how much pressure do you think he will be under, really, from the first kick of the next campaign?
Yeah, I mean, lots of kind of sort of angles on that question. I mean, the defending Leeds and throwing away Leeds sort of thing, that's down to the players as much as Eddie Howe. He instructs the players, of course, but he can't go on the pitch and do it for them. So if they let him down, like let's say Crystal Palace away as an example, you've got a 1-0 lead, you're going in the closing stages, and then Newcastle United just, evaporated in the last sort of quarter of that game, threw the points away and lost the match and piled the pressure on the manager. So they've got to use their own knowledge. I believe in that game, they kept pushing for the other goal when, really wanted to. Sorry, they sat back and protected the lead when he was asking to go for the second goal to kill the game off. So there's an argument to be had there. But in terms of his sort of future, I think for me, it's restarting next season, for example. What will it be like giving him another 6 months? Well, you'd go into pre-season and I think everything would be quite rosy in the garden again. He would have his transfer window. I think you always come back for the new season with optimism. So I think for me, people would come back, do chanting his name on Saturday. They've been chanting his name throughout this run. They'll be chanting his name again at the start of the new season. It'll be about Newcastle getting off to a good start. Can they get off to a good start? If they don't have Europe, then win your first 2 or 3 games, then you're suddenly back at the top of the table. And none of this, it feels like it wouldn't have even happened. So, he's gonna get that other opportunity. So, I think people just probably will have to look at it and think it's been a bad season, draw a line through it, and try and move on to the next one. But have a bad start to the season, then it all comes back again.
I think a lot of people fear a bit of a hangover. A lot of people have kind of pinpointed Spurs' season and how it ended the season before and how it kind of rolled into the current campaign. You mentioned the word restart there, or reset. Do you think that there won't be a hangover and this season will kind of be just written off and it'll be a clean slate, or is that a little bit too extreme?
I think the new season's going to be hopefully a more exciting season for Newcastle in the Premier League. And if they don't have Europe, again, they're going to have less distractions. But I think they're going to make a lot of changes to the playing staff. They can't put in a new team, but I think they're going to make a lot of changes. There's going to be people leaving. There's going to be contracts not getting renewed. They're going to need some fresh impetus. And I think for Eddie Howe, he'll possibly be looking at younger players, trying to get a sort of freshness and an energy to the team that they've lacked this season. But overall, they've got to be better players. They've got to be better than what Newcastle have currently got. For me, there's some players that aren't getting an opportunity at the minute who could make the team better. Nick Walter-Marder being the main one, the main signing who has been dramatically overlooked, really. He hasn't started a game in the Premier League as a striker since January. It's now May. So he can't turn around and say he's had a fair crack of the whip, in my opinion. But again, with respect to Eddie Howe, he's the one who sees people on the training pitch every single day. He knows what's going on behind the scenes. We don't get to see that. So, yeah, it's a strange one, but they're going to have to hit the ground running next season, whatever happens.
Certainly so. A big thanks to our sponsors, NordVPN and Saily. You can get a discount on both products by hitting the links in the podcast description box. Perfect if you're about to go away on your summer holidays. NordVPN allows you to browse public Wi-Fi safely, protecting you from the potential hackers and scammers lurking in the shadows, while Saily is the eSIM providing you with network coverage from over 200 destinations to choose from, all at affordable prices. So hit the link in the podcast description box, support the podcast at the same time. Lee, as you might imagine, we have plenty of questions when it comes to transfers. And this one comes in from Jules, and she writes, Newcastle have been linked once again to PSG's Ramos, but when led to believe that the transfer strategy is moving away from these big money marquee signings. So how would this fit in?
Well, for me, that would be a big money signing anyway, would it not, in terms of wages and stuff like that? So, yeah, I mean, they know that. We actually asked David Hopkinson directly, will you be making marquee signings? And he basically said, we can make marquee signings, but it depends on who we sell. We'd have to sell to buy those marquee signings. And I think at one stage, it was Simon Kappa kind of said, well, what do you mean by big money signings, marquee signings? So it's how you define it, really. I mean, for me, go back to January when Bournemouth signed Ryan from Brazil, and he's been an absolute success, and he was a good fee. That was a deal Newcastle probably could have been in and around. For me, that would have been a big sort of story signing. I wouldn't say marquee signing because he's not yet fully established, but every game, every week, he's looking like a player who's going to go on and play for Brazil for many, many years. And for me, I think that Newcastle United might just be looking at that signing and going, you know what, we should have been in there. That was on a plate for us, and we didn't do it. For me, that was a big missed opportunity. They need to make sure next time they're on top of them. Newcastle United make 3 or 4 signings of that ilk. I think everyone gets behind that. They don't have to be marquee signings, just have to be signings that are going to get people off the seats. And that was certainly a signing. As we've seen at St James's Park, we were getting off our seats for a different reason against Bournemouth recently. That was a signing Newcastle should have been all over for me.
And I guess that's the balance, because Ryan wasn't exactly cheap, but it's probably the wages which make the difference, isn't it? Because in this day and age, it's the wages and sign-on fees that can really impact the overall price of a move. But when I saw those links to Ramos, and he's a familiar name to Newcastle United fans, he's been linked over the last few windows, instantly your mind goes to how much is he going to cost, and you're probably looking 40 to 50 million at the very least, if not towards 70. And then, like you said there, how much is he going to cost on a weekly wage? And that straight away for me rules out any potential move in the summer, because again, we're led to believe that Newcastle United are going to aim for these lesser known, well-established players who have got a distance to go before they're considered elite. So it's going to be certainly interesting. I mean, what's your view on that link? Overall, do you think it's one to watch? Do you think it's one to discount? What's your opinion on it?
I mean, just flipping back to Ryan for a second there. I mean, I haven't actually seen his pay packet, but I do know that it would probably fit into Newcastle's wage structure, and the fees were again within Newcastle's reach. So for me, that would be a signing I would definitely have looked at. I mean, in terms of other players we've been linked with so many players, haven't we? At the minute, Eddie Howe doesn't know exactly what position he's going for. He doesn't know which targets he's going to be going for because he doesn't know who's going to be sold. You can kind of make a rough estimate and say Anthony Gordon looks like he's going to be sold. Perhaps Tino Livramento could be sold as well. I mean, Bruno has been linked. I think that would be a tough one to sort of take. Tonali as well. So it depends who goes, how much you're going to get, and then how much you can reinvest. And for me, I think it's just such a big summer. I mean, when I've spoken to people there, they basically said it's going to be a complex summer, and it's not going to be one that's, everyone's saying, oh, let's get these signings done early. Newcastle have struggled to do that in the past. You've got the issue of the World Cup slap bang in the middle of the transfer window. You've got players away. It's going to be very difficult. So I think it's going to be a complicated summer. I don't think it's going to be, let's hit the ground running in the transfer window. I find that difficult to see.
And I guess with Ramos, you said last week on the Q&A that you didn't think a striker was top of the list. But again, if Eddie Howe stops, there's a strong possibility, in my opinion, and that means Nick Waldemar may have to leave because Eddie Howe will stick to the principle that he's been successful with at Newcastle and stick to the formation and setup which doesn't suit Waldemar, which means that a striker may have to be signed. But like I said, I think Ramos is one that would work, but I think is a little bit out of reach given where we believe the strategy to be going to. We've got another question on a little bit to what you just spoken about there about the World Cup being a bit of an issue when it comes to hitting the ground running in the transfer market. Florian asks, Howe has always said he likes to get new players in as early as possible, but this hasn't tended to happen. Do you think this will happen this summer?
Yeah, I mean, almost going back to something that I touched on in the last answer. For me, it feels like they need to sort of get their own sort of house in order in terms of get a transfer kitty in the bag first, which they don't seem to have at the minute. The SCR rules are going to be extremely difficult for Newcastle, but there's also a free transfer market that people should be looking at, the out of contract market. Later in the window, they might look at loans as well, but it's hard for them to realistically say we are definitely going to have a player through the door early on at the minute. If you ask Eddie Howe that at the minute, his head is buried in this season. I'm sure they've got targets. I'm sure they're looking at players, but and also you're going to have clubs are going to see Newcastle coming a bit as well in terms of they're going to sort of make it difficult. They've never made it easy, by the way, but they're going to have to pay top money, and they've got no European football to offer. Someone might look at someone like Nick Waldemar, for example, and say, well, he went there, hasn't had his chance, and he's ended up potentially wasting half a season. And again, I don't want to keep repeating it, but if he goes to the World Cup and starts banging goals in for Germany, it's going to make a mockery of what's happened at Newcastle in the second half of the season. That would be very unfortunate, but unfortunately, that's how the game of football gets played out. People get proved right, people get proved wrong. I hope, for our sake, that Waldemar comes back from the World Cup and he's still a Newcastle player. But yeah, that's straying away from the question a little bit there, but I think that's definitely one to watch, the Waldemar at the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things in play, isn't it, when it comes to transfer window and how quickly they can get things done. And like you said, the World Cup is just a bit of a headache when it comes to that, not just for timings, but fees as well. If a player has a good World Cup, then suddenly you're looking at an extra, 5-10 million on the price tag, and you've also probably alerted other clubs to this player as well. So it's a bit of a roll of the dice, I guess. Starting well in the transfer window and having a successful one as well. Moving away from transfers for now, we've had a lot of questions in about the stadium improvements, which the club announced yesterday. The floodlights is one that's particularly got people's attention, Lee. Not the announcement that we've all been waiting upon regarding the long-term future of St James's Park. But what's your view on those, I don't know if I can call them minor improvements? I mean, the club would probably argue it's going to cost them a pretty penny, and they're major improvements, but your opinion on them?
Yeah, I think it's been in the pipeline for a while. I think we did the story a while back that they're going to do this, and £1 million worth of improvements around the whole ground, just to tidy up really of what we've already got at St James's Park. But in terms of the stadium, I mean, yeah, it's great to have new floodlights, but in terms of the stadium, it's not the story that we get excited about. It's just kicking the can down the road again for the stadium. I think fans are getting a bit, people I speak to, they're getting a bit anxious, bit irritated by it all, that what's going on with the stadium. It feels like we're definitely staying at St James's Park short term because of the 2028 Euros coming here, which will be a great occasion, don't get me wrong. But that kind of puts us, it pauses where we are. We want to hear the announcement one way or the other. I mean, a lot of us want to stay at St James's Park anyway. If you're going to do that, do it. Make it a better stadium. If you're going to move, make the decision and go that way. But at the end of the day, Newcastle, last time I spoke to them, haven't made the decision, haven't decided. So we're just kind of in this cycle of potential news to no news, and it's just going round and round and round. And, it's a stadium that desperately needs an increase. If Newcastle are doing very well in the Premier League, people want to be in the stadium. Obviously, every game's close to a sellout, but more recently, there's been tickets become available. There's no escaping that. But again, if they make a good start next season and they make a few new signings and everyone wants a season ticket, again, people who haven't had them, I know a lot of people who are trying to get season tickets. So, yeah, it's something that needs to be done. And obviously, there's the family element of it as well. If you've got young kids who want to, start supporting Newcastle and invest in the club and have a seat, they can't do it at the minute. And that needs to be looked at seriously. They've got the season ticket waiting list. That's another positive. But overall, we're looking for a bigger and better story than having better floodlights.
Well, hopefully that comes sooner rather than later. The next question comes in from Tommy, and it's all about Lewis Miley. He asks, is he injury prone or just unlucky? This, of course, comes after news that he suffered an injury in training and will miss the rest of the season, but he is hopefully going to be back for pre-season.
Yeah, massive blow for him. It's not the first injury he's had, but every player is going to suffer injuries. No player wants to be injured, but I don't know if we'll ever get the full level of detail. But to break your leg in training is a tough one to swallow. But the news from the club is that he'll be back for pre-season, so it doesn't look like it's a bad break. When a player used to break their leg, years ago, that was it. They were out for 9 or 10 months. So to have the news that he's going to be in contention again in pre-season suggests it's not as bad as one of them sort of injuries we've heard of in the past. For me, great young player, massive blow because he's starting to impress on the big stage now in front of the watching England manager. He's already got England youth caps under his belt. I'm pretty sure when the UEFA Nations League kicks off in autumn that, he'd be, if he has a good start of the season, he'd be in and around that in terms of following someone like Elliot Anderson into the setup. But yeah, big blow for him. Hopefully he gets back sooner rather than later.
Fingers crossed. This one comes from Alan on X. He says, how can Newcastle owners tell us their fairy tale ambitions of 2030, then decide to keep Eddie Howe, who can't manage 2 games per week? Now we will be playing 1 game a week next season because of his failings. So, Alan, I think you had a couple of questions actually in last week's Q&A, quite clearly in the Eddie Howe out camp. But I guess there are a few fans with concerns, Lee, not necessarily about next season, but the season after, when the hope is Newcastle will be back in some sort of European competition, and how Eddie Howe handles what he struggled with in the eyes of many, this campaign, and that's the busy schedule.
Yeah, well, we don't know for sure if we're going to be in Europe next season or not, which changes the dynamic again, doesn't it? If they got in the Conference League, then that's going to be interesting in terms of how he would manage that playing on a Thursday night. So yeah, I mean, if Newcastle were looking for the box office manager, this was the opportunity to change manager. They've obviously decided that they didn't want to do that. They've seen something in the meetings that they've had that says Eddie Howe's the man. That's what they've seen. They know all the finances. They know what his philosophy is going to be, and they've stuck by him. If he makes a great start next season, we're going to have loads of pundits saying, "Oh, this is what." If people had panicked, then, Eddie Howe would have been at another club now and you'd be somewhere else. So there's a real narrative, isn't there, from pundits who seem to want to put down what Newcastle fans think. And, Alan, like anyone else, is entitled to his opinion. And, going back to the 2030 thing, if Newcastle finish mid-table again next year, then that's going to start to look a little bit difficult, unless you got someone in who can shoot you up the league on a limited budget. That's fairy tale stuff there and there. So yeah, it's all I can say is that if they were going down the road of changing manager, this was the opportunity to do it, and they haven't really taken that.
Stopping on that kind of question, this one comes in from Bobby, who says Aston Villa have a chance of making a European final and remain 5th in the league. Do you, Lee, think they've got a better squad than Newcastle United? And is the Pro League form of Newcastle United kind of incomparable, is the word he uses? So I think a lot of fans quite rightly do look at Villa and think, well, they've probably played just a few more games than Newcastle this season, and yet they are sitting pretty in storm for Champions League qualification via the league.
Yeah, I mean, Unai Emery is what I would call an elite coach. I mean, he's won trophies, he's won European trophies. He's managed to get Villa into the top 5. He's also juggling the Europa League and doing a good job at the minute. Yeah, they're 1-0 down. But if they got to a final, then I'm sure they'd be delighted with that. But even if they get in the Champions League, it's been a great achievement for them. But yeah, it's something that Newcastle need to look at. It is possible to balance more than one competition. We haven't done it very well this season, but there's been mitigating circumstances around that. But as a manager, that's what you've got to try and deal with. And Newcastle, unfortunately, they just haven't done it very well. So yeah, it's been a tough season, and I think the big thing that emerges from the meetings is that this can't happen again next season.
I guess it all comes down with experience as well. Unai Emery's very well mastered in that kind of art of balancing European competitions and domestic campaigns, and obviously tailed off towards then the last season, and maybe tailing off again domestically this campaign. But hopefully Eddie Howe gets more campaigns under his belt and can work his magic as well. Final question then, Lee. No name on this one, but it's all about exits this summer. And the question reads, how important is it that Newcastle are ruthless when it comes to sales this summer? And this question mentions Willock, Gordon and Asula. And I guess with Willock having a bit of resurgence, but probably his time to go. Gordon, I guess it comes down to getting the most value for him, because it looks like he is set to leave. And Asula's the interesting one. I guess many people will look at Miguel Almiron's purple patch, if you like, and how Newcastle held on to him and he never recaptured that form. You could argue the same with Jacob Murphy a couple of years back as well. We'll start with Asula. I mean, in your opinion, if someone comes in with a big money bid after he finishes this season strongly, do Newcastle, have they got to be sensible here and say, is he really going to hit the heights again? And we should cash in if it's, I don't know, 35, 40 million?
For me, I would keep him. if I'm being totally honest. If you're offering 35 million, then that's what, by the time all that gets sort of spread around and the rules come into it, this is a player who he brings you something completely different. That turn of pace is just incredible. He made that run on Saturday down the right wing, and it absolutely bamboozled Brighton defence. They just didn't know where to go. He's got that ability to turn a game, the Man United game especially. For me, he's still a young player as well. I think he's going to go on and be a full international for 35 million pounds. That for me wouldn't be a great return, because I think he is going to be a player that can go on and do more. And let's say they do get in, maybe I'm dreaming a little bit, they get in the Europa Conference League, he'd be an ideal player to put in on a Thursday night, full of freshness, full of energy. He'd get bags of goals in that competition. I think he's a player that could still have a future at Newcastle.
And in terms of Willock, he's done well in the last couple of games, but even if he goes on to, I don't know, took a number out, score 7 or 8 goals in the last 3 games and repeat that brilliant form he had when he first arrived, is it important that, I don't know if sentimentality is the right word, but that Newcastle United still press ahead with getting rid of maybe some of the old guard who have been here and haven't really kicked on in the last couple of years?
I'm going to sound like, say, keep the whole squad here, but you've thrown 2 players at me who I actually quite rate, and Joe Willock is what, for me, he's a player you would want to keep in and around the squad. Again, how much are you going to recoup for Joe Willock? He's a player who enjoys his time at Newcastle. He's had some great moments. He's stayed injury free, and he offers you something in midfield. And if you do lose, let's say you lose a Bruno, let's say you lose a Tonali this season, and remember he can play out wide as well, and he's an offensive player. For me, I think he's a good. I don't want to sort of say he's a squad player because that's disrespectful. For me, he's a player who can command regular football. He can play 1 game a week or something. He can maybe come off the bench in Europe or something like that. For me, he would be a player that I would personally want to keep around. I believe when he's injury free, he's an excellent player to have on the pitch. So yeah, I wouldn't be selling Joe Willock either. There's some other players I would look at who, maybe have come to the end of the road at Newcastle, but the 2 that you're throwing at us there, unfortunately, I probably disagree. I would say keep them.
Hey, all a matter of opinion, isn't it? And get into the comments, ladies and gents, and share your opinion on who you would like to see Newcastle sell this summer. Just briefly on Gordon, I mean, if you're sitting around the negotiation table, what are you putting in terms of a price on him?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen £74 million bandied around, which seems to be the ballpark figure. But remember, you've got to pay Everton 15% of that, so you're almost just about getting your money back with a small profit for a player you signed for what, 45 million, I think it was, from Everton. So yeah, you're going to make a small profit back. But for me, I think Gordon has been a great player for Newcastle. He's scored a lot of goals this season. Yeah, people keep saying some of them were penalties, but he can actually miss a penalty as well. So for me, he's a player who perhaps has come to the end of his time at Newcastle. Highly ambitious. Maybe we have. Look, maybe we've got to be honest. As a club, we haven't delivered enough. We're not going to be in the Champions League next season. He is a Champions League player, no doubt about it. That's the stage that he seems to enjoy playing on, and maybe we haven't delivered. So for me, he's probably come to the end of his time at Newcastle because his head's probably been turned a little bit. But I will say as well, what I've been told behind the scenes, he has not turned around and said, I want to leave this football club. He's basically a player who knows that when it comes to, sellable assets, he's going to be one of them. And I think perhaps he's accepting of the fact that he's the player that's probably going to have to be sold to raise funds to bring somebody else in. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but for me, he's been a class player on his day for Newcastle. But now it's probably the time to cash in.
Well, let us know in the comments how much you would sell Anthony Gordon for this summer. Thank you to Lee for popping on to the Q&A. Watch out for more content coming this week from Gibbo, Sean and Lee as well after the press conference on Friday. Pleasure as always, and we'll catch you guys very soon.